Welcome to Decades of Horror, the classic era.
I am told by a friend that you have some views for sale.
This is episode 89, recorded December 13th, 2020. I am your host, Jeff Mohr. On this podcast, we cover the good, the bad, and maybe even the ugly films released since the beginning of time through 1969. In each episode, we'll discuss the monsters, spirits, psychos, and villains that have haunted movie-going audiences since the dawn of film history. With me this week are my incredible co-ghosts. First up, Whitney Chaoto, an accomplished artist, makeup artist, and writer. Whitney, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. We have to, this is a standard thing. We got to do a DOH weather report. It's here in Iowa. It went from mid-50s on Thursday to about 5 inches of snow yesterday. So, and now it's like 25 or something like that.
Here in North Carolina, it's bipolar. The weather changes so much within a day. I think it's like in the 50s or 60s right now.
Yeah, it's almost 60 degrees here.
Yeah.
It's chaos.
Yes.
Oh, anyway. That other voice you hear is Chad Hunt, co-host on Decades of Horror, the 1970s and 1980s, film producer and director with Wreak Havoc Productions, and a comic book artist and writer. Chad, how are you?
I'm on my fifth shower since watching this movie.
Oh, boy.
So, Joseph Perry, due to other commitments, is off for the rest of 2020, and we miss him. But that gives us an opportunity to include listener guest hosts for a few episodes. Filling in this episode is listener guest host Shawn Parks. How are you, Shawn?
I'm doing fabulous, Jeff. How are you doing this morning? I know that Chad does not like doing these morning podcasts, as I am a bit of a super fan, but I like this recording time. I'm footloose and fancy free right now. How are you?
I'm good. And Shawn, you have your own podcast. What you want to tell us about that for a second?
Yeah, I do a podcast called Talk Horror to Me, and It's similar in some ways to this. It's certainly inspired by the Decades of Horror brand. But we try to put our own little twists on things.
Cool. Where can we find it?
Anywhere podcasts can be found. Talk Horror to Me. Thank you very much for asking. I appreciate that.
Excellent. Hey, we love talking horror. Doesn't matter if someone else is doing it or we're doing it or whatever. So I appreciate you coming on today. And we're letting our guest host pick the film. And Shawn's pick today is Peeping Tom from 1960, directed by Michael Powell, starring Heinz Baum and Anna Massey, Mohr Shearer. And I think a lot of people probably have heard of this. Maybe they haven't seen it, but they've at least heard of it. A young man murders women using a movie camera to film their dying expressions of terror. Yeah, that works. And we're not going to be careful about this at all. So, if you haven't seen it and you're worried about spoilers, you should go watch it. Filmed in the UK, production company lists Michael Powell. The London premiere was April 7th, 1960, and countrywide on May 16th. Did not get to the U.S. until December 1961. This has an unusually large number of alternate titles. Face of Fear was listed as a USA TV title. I'm not sure when that was. Of course, for Germany, we have Augen der Angst, Eyes of Fear. Denmark, I just like the way this sounds because I don't know. It's like a description more than a title. And I don't know how to pronounce in Danish. So fotomodeller jages, which means photo models are hunted.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's on the nose right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Whitney, you want to take the Spanish version in Mexico release?
El fotógrafo del medio.
I agree.
Yeah. Which, according to the translator, is the photographer of fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's pretty accurate too, right?
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
This thing has lots of filming locations. A lot of these were on site. We've got the shop and a variety of other places. So all over London, with some of the things done in Pinewood Studios. It took 6 weeks beginning in October 1959. The budget, according to IMDb, is £135,000, which translates in 1959, when this was filmed, to about $280,000. Wikipedia lists the budget as £125,000 or £100,000. So I don't know. They don't keep real good records of that stuff. Have no numbers on the domestic box office, but I'm assuming it was pretty low because of the brouhaha it created. And this is another one. For some reason, Chad, we've been running into these movies that just have a ton of taglines.
I was going to say, man, these taglines need their own audiobook that we could just...
Yeah, well,
Okay. Taglines. Stark terror meets art in a deadly game of cat and mouse.
And that was on the DVD, I guess.
Yeah, and so's this one, which just screams DVD tagline. Years ahead of its time and still one of the most disturbing and psychologically complex horror films ever made.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, and the third one, everyone should really let this sink in. See it from the beginning.
Wow.
Don't come into the middle like the rest of these schlubs.
Yeah, just like as opposed to all the other movies where we don't.
Yeah. Fourth one, it'll be £2. Shut the door. No!
I don't even get that.
Well, I think it's referring to the beginning with the prostitute. It'll be £2.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow. How about £2 to lighten your attitude a little bit, lady?
What I don't get, like, in order to understand that one, you have to have already seen the movie.
Yeah. And I'd walk into Walmart and pick this up off the shelf and go, oh, it's only £2. I don't know how much that is in the UK money, but just shut the door. Is this thing on?
Tougher,
yes.
buddy.
Okay.
Yes. Shut the door.
Shut the front door. Do you know what the most frightening thing in the world is?
Fear.
You're going to have to find out and watch this movie, and it's still probably not the most frightening thing in the world.
Looks like the next one is just a repeat.
Yeah, that's a repeat. Terror meets art in a deadly game of cat and mouse. I'm not reading that again. Oh, it just did. Anyway, onward. Don't see Peeping Tom. This sounds like a Dr. Phil promo. Don't see Peeping Tom unless you're prepared to see the screaming shock and raw terror in the faces of those marked for death. Tune in Friday.
Warning.
Can you see yourself in this picture? Can you imagine yourself facing the terror of a diabolical killer? Can you guess how you'd look? You'll live that kind of excitement, suspense, horror when you watch Peeping Tom.
I love it.
These aren't taglines.
That's not a tagline.
These are not taglines.
It's great.
This is like an advertisement for sweet tea is what that was.
Yes.
That's your typical sitting on the front porch North Carolinian right there. Don't dare tell the ending to anyone. You'll be blamed for nightmares.
No, that sounds like you're getting lost in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, a dirt road and a farmhouse. What made this the most diabolical murder weapon ever used? What are they talking about? I have no idea.
I don't know. There must have been a series of pictures with arrows. You know,
Could be I don't know. An adventure into terror. Mm-hmm. More horrible than horror. More terrible than terror. And
I like that.
£2 to see it.
So we have to make up words that are more extreme than horror and terror, apparently.
More dribblier than dribble. No. Marked for death by Peeping Tom. To look meant danger. To smile meant death, which is not anything. It was the complete opposite of what the movie was. If you were scared, you died, right?
That's right. That was the whole point.
To look meant danger. You could look at him all day. He wouldn't care. He was looking back anyway. So Peeping Tom. And then, okay, anyway. Han fotograferade, sin smycke offre, and Jeff put this in here on purpose, just so he knew I was reading. Dorten Schliebig Nacken. He photographed his beautiful victims at the moment of death.
That's the first time I've seen foreign language taglines in a.
Der Skeski Criminal Geyser D No Genocide D Harset. The strongest crime thriller you've ever seen. Okay, I'm glad that's over.
We're trying to encourage comments from our Danish listeners.
And the only comments are going to say, how can you let Chad just destroy our language like that?
All right.
He was screaming, cage the lions in German. He wasn't even speaking.
Oh, man.
Okie dokie. Okay.
I can't even speak my own language that well. And
this is just like every podcast we're on lately. It's just had this huge amount of taglines. Unlike Doc, who would say, we're not going to read all those. I can't help myself.
Well, you get more bang for your buck here at Classic Era.
That's true. That's true.
Well played.
Okay. So first impressions, first time seeing this film, and what kind of impression did it give you, and how does it hold up now? Shawn, you okay with going first on this?
Sure.
Since it was your pick.
It would be an honor. I think I saw this first during quarantine. It's changed so many of our lives in so many ways. For me, I went on a real horror binge, and this is one that cropped up, and I really, really enjoyed this movie. I knew it a bit from the book called The Teenage Slasher Movie Book by J.A. Kurzweil, and this is a book that I really enjoy because it breaks down the slasher movie by decade, essentially, but it really focuses on that critical era between 1978 and 1984, and this would be considered a proto-slasher in his school of thought. And so I was just dipping back into it, expecting to see sort of the faint shadow of something that I was going to eventually see in the 80s, and it's not that at all. I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. It's very it is ahead of its time, really. It broke a lot of taboos, maybe, or barriers, especially in UK. Whitney, I am really interested in hearing what you thought of this.
Oh, well, you heard Chad say earlier how many times he had to shower because of this one. Well, I wouldn't say that, but I will say like this one is very disturbing and creepy in his own right because of the situations that are presented with what this person does, this killer, and I feel, I don't know how much I'm really going to say, but it's beautiful. Like, it's so strange, it's creepy, it's beautiful. The colors, the hues, the saturations, and all this vibrant color kind of coming out in these scenes and sets, and how everything is showing with the characters and what's going on and how he presents himself before he has this odd and awkward charm before he does these strange and unique ways of going about being a killer. And voyeurism is particularly something that creeps, I think, most women out. So, yeah, there's just a lot of things that really get to me, especially where he takes a stab with these women. So it's crazy. I don't know. Oh, I guess we'll get more into it. I'll stop rambling now.
Chad, how about you? When was the first time you saw this?
This is the first time I've seen it.
Oh, okay.
And it's been in my Amazon queue for like however years now, it seems like. But I've never seen it, never heard of it, and didn't know anything about it. Pretty much like Shawn, I was just going through Amazon one day, just stockpiling movies into my watch list, being in quarantine and all. So this was one of those. So, and that's the cool thing about maybe, with some of the viewers or listeners coming in and suggesting some of these movies, is a lot of these I've not seen. So that's a really cool, and I'm glad Shawn picked it and we're able to watch it. But, man, did this had some really, really creepy themes in it and concepts in it that that people found shocking back then. But I guess, especially the ones where he would play the tapes back of his father, recording him and recording his fear, and that type of thing just really made me queasy. It was really, really hard to watch. And then where he just develops this thing where he kills, but they have to be scared, because that's what his father was doing. He was trying to capture fear on film, and so he had developed this urge then to kill, but only if the victim was scared out of their mind. And so this really had some things in it, much like Psycho did at the time. Some taboo subjects that weren't really brought to light very much in movies. And so this was just, it just sat with me the wrong way at first as I was watching it. But as the story unfolded toward the end, it started to make more sense. And you saw the motivations for why he was doing this. And I like that he wasn't just a killer. There was more to his character than that. He was trying to redeem himself in a way with, was it Helen? Was that the character's name? Helen in the movie? She was trying to help him redeem himself, and her mother with the alcoholic superpowers. She knew what he was about, from the get-go, it seemed like. Very interesting story, very, very well written and engrossing is the thing. Something that I thought was maybe a cheap B-movie type from the little poster card in Amazon where you watch it. Just something that looked like a little cheap 60s B-movie, type killer movie or something. Turned out to be something a lot more than that. When I watched it, there's many, many layers to it, and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I did too. And this is kind of the same. I had heard of this, and its reputation. The first time I watched it, I don't know. I'm guessing it was a couple of years ago, but same thing. When it starts off, you're not sure what to expect. As time goes on, it kind of feels like you start to almost feel sympathetic for him, the way he was treated when he was a child, and the struggles that he's having with Helen, because he doesn't want to harm her, so he's struggling to not be triggered by her, which is the fear is the thing that gets him. And there's several things going on over the course of this movie that we can talk about later. But I thought I really liked the way you described it, Whitney. His performance as Mark Lewis being kind of an odd and awkward charm.
Yeah.
Because part of me was thinking, he's nobody would go for this guy. I mean, he's just, how creepy can you be? But then all of a sudden there would be a couple scenes, some dialogue, whatever, where he really was kind of charming. But then there would be these times of just really weirdness.
Yeah.
I think that there's such a potent element of the artist in this movie, and I'm wondering if it resonated differently with Whitney and Chad, in that he's of a mind, and like, I know this guy, and so you say that he's just creepy. Now there's this alluring sense of mystery to him, and especially when you're a young artist, when you first meet a person like that, it can be very entrancing. And I think a lot of people who don't engage in the world of art in sort of this metaphysical way don't necessarily register that type of person in the same way, as I do in my experiences. And I'm wondering if that's making sense, and if there's a distinction to be made there.
Actually, it's funny that you say that, because with personal experience, I've had to kind of take a look at this character in between certain scenes, because you're seeing some of this stuff from his perspective, but also because of him being an artist, I'm seeing little quirks and things that I have seen in other artists. And as a lady, I'm like, I've seen some of these mannerisms, especially when he's holding on to his satchels and things with his stuff. And Helen says, well, do you carry that stuff with you all the time? Well, there's certain people that I know personally, and what I like to do personally, even like, I like to keep a mini sketchbook with me all the time, even if I'm not going to use it. But there's people that have little quirks where they just want to, as artists, they'll keep certain things, their pens, their pencils, their a camera or something. And that's something that stood out to me as that was a part of his artistic identity.
And it's very relatable in a way that makes it, for me, where you say quirks that you see in other artists, there were quirks that I see in myself. And so that was like harrowing in a very visceral way that I was not expecting. This is the story of a man. He's an artist. He's a craftsman, obviously. His practice is in film. And then he's a young man who's falling in love for the first time. And then he's also, unfortunately, a serial killer, right? Like, that's the rub of the whole thing. And you can dissect it from all those different perspectives. And it's a gripping movie, I think, along each of those tales.
Yeah,
it is. There's a lot of layers here, and a lot of and speaking to the same thing, a lot of, and I know Whitney said this already, but yeah, there's a lot of people, especially artistic types, who have those little quirks like that, and myself included. There's things that I see in this character myself. Not that I go around killing people, but different things like carrying certain pens with you wherever you go. Your favorite artistic supplies, always have those in a bag somewhere or a case somewhere, and so it's for almost the same reasons. You want, at any given moment, you want to draw something to capture a moment, or to get a sketch to use for reference later or something like that. So yeah. So
that right there is the artist's mind. And the only reason I interrupt is because you've excited me here, because you've helped elicit sort of something I've been trying to put together in a long time. As an artist, you're always looking at the world as potentially your canvas. Yeah. And so there's a percentage of your consciousness that's devoted to that. Even if you're driving and you're focusing on the real world. Many people who don't embrace art as a practice in their life, they're only reading reality for what reality is. But by virtue of having that pen with you, there's always a piece of you that's saying the real world might drop back to be the canvas for my art.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's almost a comfort too, knowing that at any given time you'll have what you need to draw. and or whatever it is your artistic thing is. There's a comfort in that, for me anyway. So I get that.
Oh, definitely.
I have no way to relate to that in terms of drawing, but I do like taking photographs. And I have gone through periods where I carried a camera with me in my job, I drove all over the state. And I just always took my camera with me so that if anything popped up that looked visually interesting, I could just stop and take a picture. So I don't know how artistic I am, but I really like, one of the things I've discovered in doing these podcasts is how much I'm drawn in by the visuals in a film. So in terms of that, however, let's talk about this a little bit in terms of the Mark Lewis, the main character's motivation. So the opening scene, we have him walking down the street with a camera hidden in his coat, movie camera, and he sees a woman on the side of the street, and he goes up to her, and I don't think he even says anything, and she just looks at him and says, "$2," and then they go into a room, and then he ends up killing her, although we don't actually see the kill, right? So it's interesting in this movie how disturbing and creepy it is without being really graphic. And then later on, how do I say this? I'm trying to synopsize a little bit. So he lives in an apartment building, like a house that's divided into rooms. And we find out that he owns it, and he lives upstairs. It was his father's. And he meets the woman, Helen, who lives downstairs, played by Anna Massey. And they become friends, and he kind of gets his crush on her, or have a relationship with her. And he wants to keep her separate from his obsession, which is seeing the fear. And it's a special kind of fear, as we find out later. And I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this part. It's not revealed until the end. But in his first kill, he pulls his tripod has both rubber feet on it, and then you can pull it off, and it's a pointy stick, kind of on the end of the leg, and he starts coming at him with that, and then he goes and turns and grabs something else, and there's kind of a little light spotlight that sort of flutters around their face, and then that's when they get really scared, and the fear really shows up on them. And then when we see films of him that his father took when he was a boy, we see that same light. And when he's showing them to Helen, she asks, what is that light? And he doesn't answer her. Mm-hmm. And then that goes on in every, kill that we see. And finally, we see it at the end, and it's sort of I don't know is it a concave or convex? I think it's a concave mirror designed maybe to focus light. But the idea being that the people are seeing their own fear in the mirror as distorted. And so this thing really kind of turns back on itself. He's a kind of a voyeur, and he's turning the people he killed into a voyeur of their own death almost. And we're all watching it. So what did you think about this whole, the way that Powell portrays that and sort of lets that out? Did you catch on to that ahead of time at all, or wondered what that light was? And I think it also, is this a sexual obsession or just an obsession?
At first I didn't catch on to it as, with the father doing it. I just thought maybe it was a light to as he was for the photography purposes. But then as the film went on, I figured that he wanted them to see it more. That would make it all that more horrifying. and make them more scared. So that's what I got from that. But I didn't catch on to it at first, and that was just an added creepiness to it that the father, and that's the father was making him do that, It just that whole sequence with the filming of the father just sat bad with me for some reason. It just made me really uncomfortable. Being a dad myself, it just, how could you do that to your kid type thing? But it made it really, really made it all that more, you understood his motivation then. You understood why he did that to his victims. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't catch on to that at first until he started to really explain towards the end why he was doing it and what he was doing, and how it made him feel. Especially when the mother sort of cornered him in his little studio there, his little workshop, and sort of brought a lot of things to light there too, because she had him figured out. It seemed like from the very beginning she started asking questions about him and what he did and where he worked, and did he work with the other victim and that type of thing. So this was written very, very well, and it could have been whatever the budget was. The script was very, very, very tight and very into what was going on. It was very tightly knit together. All these little, all these different facets of everything that was going on was very, very tightly knit together. So yeah, I did not catch on to that at first. I was aware of the light and everything, but I didn't know. I thought it was more of a technical thing than something that would explain why he was doing that, to generate that fear and everything. If that makes sense. Yeah. Did I give a coherent answer?
Yeah. Well, and I thought the light was just some kind of weird spot, but it was odd because it wasn't really like a light that was used to light for filming. It was more narrow. Whitney or Shawn, any comments about? Because I thought, at first when I'm thinking Peeping Tom, I'm thinking of somebody that's getting some sort of sexual gratification out of this, but I am not seeing that in this. It's more of a psychological obsession.
There may have been, but given the time this was filmed,
I can see it very subtly in some ways because today people are more comfortable talking about fetishism and fetishizing people and certain settings, and people are more comfortable talking about trauma. And I know I'm one of those people that is more empathetic to hearing and listening to what people have gone through that's traumatic in their life and in their world. And I'm seeing when he's a kid and why it makes sense for Chad to be uncomfortable as a father, to see what this father is doing to his child. And it's abusive. It is abusive. Mm-hmm. And it is also, some people could look at it and say that's almost like a fetish, or it's weird, or it's somewhat of a way of this person to get off on this kind of thing, because that's like it could be a form of pornography. So there's a lot of taboo circulated in treatment and how he was treated. And then he talks about that, about his reasons for this, doing this kind of thing. And then it flashes me back to saying, oh, well, he went through this trauma and now he's reversing that effect on other victims. Like, he was victimized. So he's coming up with his own victims because of that trauma. That's how I took it anyway. Mm-hmm. But that, I feel like I've seen it a little bit in that aspect. And when you think a little bit about his method of killing, and it's he has that you know what I'm talking about, the actual tool itself.
The leg of the tripod with the... Yes, the tripod. I should know this, but words escape me sometimes. But no, it's, again, I feel like that's a masculine symbol
that he's using himself to take a stab at that penetration to go after his victim. Like, what better way as an artist and as a guy to go after that that character and use that quality is to use his tripod.
Because when he flipped that leg up, it was very phallic and very
that's true.
So I don't. It wasn't overtly so. So there are hints.
So there are hints.
And when he had the little boy sitting on the fence and he was filming him watching the lovers in the park kissing him and trying to get his reaction to it. So there was some sexual undertones that I don't think would have sat well at the time.
No.
Is why it wasn't so overt, but I think it was there. Just like Psycho. There was a lot of that in Psycho, but they couldn't really just come right out. And, it was 1960. They just didn't come right out with it back then, I don't think.
Yeah, if you had exploitation radar up at all, this would start pinging and sort of give you a false impression of what this movie might be.
Yeah.
Based on many of the reviews of the time, I guess maybe an actual view of what the movie was. It was upsetting to people. I think there's an interesting thing about the psychology and the father in that. So it is abuse, absolutely, but it's also he's using his son as a subject, and it's conditioning psychology, which in 1960 would be something that is a developing school. And so imagine an incredible thriller being released, say over Christmas in 2020, and it's a great movie, it's a brilliant movie, but one of the main villains is somebody who is developing vaccines. And part of the feel of it is, the people who are here to help us are actually the ones that are, they're vicious monsters who are using their own children as guinea pigs. It would be very shocking in a lot of ways to an emerging culture of embracing psychology.
Right. Yeah. He absolutely is using his son as an experiment subject.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that's universally understood to be unethical in psychology. Let me explain that. But when you have those kind of you understand that it's a single human's ethics are the only border really at the end between whether or not they're using the wisdom they accrue for good or for evil, right?
Right.
It's a creepy thing to have to accept, right? You have to have trust in institutions.
Right. Oh, boy, is that timely.
Right.
Anyway.
Goodness.
Yeah, in a way, so assuming his father used that same device, that mirror with the light on him, he's trying to recreate what he thought he saw in that mirror, what he did in that mirror, right? I mean, his fear of his own fear that he saw in the mirror, and then later on the films, but he's trying to create that same thing, ultimate. And you're right, Whitney. I like this whole idea that all of his tools or weapons are built around his photographic equipment, right? He's got a tripod, a focusing mirror of some kind, and the camera are involved. Yeah.
There's like a symbiotic relationship, right? Even in his mannerisms when he goes on the date and doesn't have his camera. But other times when he's being the voyeur, but he doesn't have his camera in hand, he's constantly sort of touching himself and manipulating his hands and his face, and he is at one with the camera in a way that is absolutely disturbing. It's indicative of an unhealthy obsession. And I think, Jeff, that's why you said, why would anybody find this to be interesting, right? Like, this guy is just, if you're, I totally get that POV. It's just weird, right? So you avoid the just weird. In my life, I have always been drawn to the weird.
Well, absolutely. But what I'm kind of getting at is Helen seeming to be attracted to him. So first off, the reason that she finally meets him is because he's staring in the window at her birthday party.
Yeah.
And finally, some of the people there notice it, and they don't know he's the landlord. So, and then so she says something to him later. She brings a piece of cake up to him. He offers her a drink and then says, "Oh, wait, I don't have anything to drink, except milk." But then when he shows her the film and she's asking him things like, "What's that light?" And she's asking him questions, and he's like, almost in a way, I don't know, fondling or caressing or the camera. He's just like draped over this camera and his hands rubbing it. And he's just got this look. He's just out of it. So that's what I'm talking about. And maybe she didn't actually see that. Maybe she's looking at the film and she's just thinking, why isn't he answering? But he does some very, very strange things. And maybe, in hindsight, I'm wondering if she actually saw that, but what a weird choice to show her, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to show you this film, and I guess I don't know what other films he has, but I'm going to show you how my father abused me or turned me into this monster in a way.
Well, it's as the mother eventually says, you're going to have to tell somebody.
Right.
This is him bonding with another human through his obsession for the first time, I think. And it's young love, essentially. But he instinctively knows that he has to tell somebody long before the mother punctuates it.
The old cry for help. A lot of you read about a lot of people that are serial killers and this and that, and some like to leave clues, or they want to be stopped, but they can't stop. So they give that cry for help, or that, and sometimes it's in a weird way, that's what I got from it, that he was like, he saw a kind soul in her and was just like, this, look at this. What do you think of this? But he was actually trying to say somewhere subliminally, maybe, to help me, help me. Do you understand this? That kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, there's lots of layers and possible meanings in here, and I think there's a lot of depth to the script and the filmmaking. And in fact, the writer Leo Marx was a cryptographer during World War II for England. So I don't know if that, you could almost see this being laid out like a coded message that's revealed at the end. Okay. I did want to talk about it's the reception of this. He got this film basically was crucified in the British press. As best as I could tell, there was I saw no positive reviews at the time of its release. It was deemed something to be flushed into the sewer, or no redeeming value. And they kind of, the director, Michael Powell, uses his own wife and son to play the young Mark Lewis and Mark Lewis's mother. And they, which is kind of its own type of voyeurism in a way. But they thought that was terrible, which now, I don't know, doesn't seem that bad to me in current times. But it took a while, and finally, I think probably started to get a cult following in the mid to late 60s and 70s before it, some whatever original scenes had been cut that could be restored were restored. So I don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, Scorsese was a big champion of this movie and really helped to propel it, as he did with so many films. So one thing I did see is, how do you think of this? You mentioned this as somebody that in a book where they call this a proto-slasher. So how does this fit in terms of the first slasher movies? Not that we need to define what is a first slasher movie, but this is
this is pretty darn close.
Sure, you get by nature of the thing, you get POV, which of course you see in Halloween and subsequently 100 films. The killer has a distinct and unique weapon, as you said, the tripod with this dagger in it, and he's got the compelling origin story. I think that it transcends the slasher of this, the everything from the early 80s, 80 through 84, essentially, in almost every instance, in that, as we've said, it's a very layered story. The essence of it is not simply the luridity of the kills. The luridity of the kills service the greater picture. The entire movie's lurid in many ways. Beautiful colors, beautiful purples and pinks, and there's a scene where the mother is asking him what's on the screen, and the film is projecting the woman on his back, and his gray jacket obscures part of her face, and so it looks skullish compared to the beautifully crisp image on the screen. There's just so much beauty in the craft of this movie. And of course, you didn't get that at all in the slasher films after Halloween, for the most part. I'm not to say that there isn't beauty in those movies. I could go on and on for days, but certainly I think that it's unmistakable, right? You have a killer, you have a series of kills. There's no doubt that the slasher fans would embrace this as an early offering. And before this one, I think, maybe M, right? It's very sparse before 1978, and this movie's notable in that way.
Well, I mean, if it's going to compare to anything that a viewer like myself that has enjoyed anything recent as far as what's a slasher, and especially because of his the character and his charisma, and when I watch this, I think of a lot of the last slasher series that I actually really enjoyed was You. And it made me think a lot of the persona that that character, that guy in that series, You, has. Like, he has this charm to him, but he's very observant. He's very creepy about it. But also he has this way of working in his relationship with that one person. And I thought a lot about of those similar mannerisms with that show comparing to this movie, because I saw a lot of that in this movie.
And I've heard, Psycho being called the king of the slashers, or like the first slasher movie. So, and these came out the same year, I think.
Yeah, this actually came out a few months before Psycho.
But it's the same type of formula as most slashers go. Mm-hmm. I think Psycho is the more famous movie compared to this one. So, but yeah, it follows that same formula. So I don't know. It's. I know this one's been called the very first slasher movie, probably because it did come out a couple of months before Psycho. But yeah, it follows the same tropes that they used later, down the road for the same type of movie. So, yeah, and having never seen this, I always thought Psycho was the first, king of the slashers, or first slasher movie. That's why another reason I'm glad I saw this, because it's, I'm not, you guys know I'm not a big fan of slashers in the first place, but I am a fan of Psycho and Hitchcock and those types of movies. And this one sort of fits right along in there with it, the smartness of it. Mm-hmm. The incredible, the story is just so fascinating. It has a lot of, like we say, a lot of things that going on at the same time here. But as far as a slasher goes, it's probably one of the better ones for me, anyway. If I'm gonna have to choose what's the best slasher movie.
Yeah, and kind of like Halloween in a way, although almost 20 years earlier, not much gore, although we're visualizing a lot, right? Not much blood and gore. So this might be a good time to bring up the cinematographer or the photographer, camera operator who did the photography, Otto Heller, which had an incredible career, over 200 credits. And we've done another one of his films, which wasn't nearly as, people didn't like nearly as much as I did, but Queen of Spades from 1949. Remember that one, the weird British film that was set in Russia, Chad?
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, you were the only one that really liked that.
Yeah.
No,
but the cinematography
I'm
was
kidding.
great. Yeah.
That was a beautiful movie. Queen of Spades.
Which was another favorite of Martin Scorsese's, if I recall. That's just the beginning of several other people in here that have been in other movies that we've done. Any comments on the cinematography?
It's stunning. It's beautiful, but I don't have any of the technical knowledge to bloviate on it.
Well, I mean, it's beautiful. I feel like seeing the coloration, it really does give the feel that this is showing the life of an artist. It's showing the life of artists and filmmakers, because that's what you're seeing. But seeing the sets, and I loved that about this, was that you saw the life of an artist, the filmmaker, and then being on set and then seeing what it's like to work on these sets. And then the coloration, those vibrant colors, what got me and what struck me in the cinematography at first was, I like how you guys are saying how the influence is there for Martin Scorsese. But with the opening scene, when there's that woman, and she's right there outside that shop. And right when I saw the coloration and those hues, those blues, the oranges, all of that hit me. And I saw that and I think, man, that's like a David Bowie vibe right there. And I went to Google and I actually found this. It said, according to Ziggy Stardust writer Mark Patras, the cover setting may well have had its roots in an obscure 1960 British film directed by Michael Powell called Peeping Tom. So I thought that was really cool, because I thought, man, this picturesque thing going on right here makes me think a lot about art in itself, and that artwork from that Ziggy Stardust artwork right there was something that struck me right away when I saw that opening.
And doesn't it make perfect sense because of what the phenomenon that Ziggy Stardust was, and this movie essentially examining the eye versus what is seen and everything that is in between, right? The author, the subject, the voyeur,
yes,
the present. It's so much, the everything that Bowie was.
Yeah, man, I thought that was really cool. That was really fascinating.
It is. That's interesting.
That first sequence too, it looked like you had set pieces there, and then backdrops that were painted. That really caught my eye. I don't know if it was a matte painting or just a painted backdrop or whatever, but the color, like Whitney said too, the colors and everything immediately caught my eye, and it's just beautifully shot that way. It's very bright and colorful for such a dour, a dour slasher movie with such heavy themes and concepts in it.
Yeah, that the prostitute in that scene was like the definition of world weary.
Yeah, he didn't even say anything to her, and she just said, "It'll be £2." She's just had enough for one day. It seemed like,
And how exhausted she is by the abuse of the male gaze.
She's just assuming, considering.
Yeah.
Yes. As she goes up, she had almost like a script. What does she say going up the stairs? Follow me, or I'll go first, or
yeah.
She goes up the stairs, and it's literally like trudging up the stairs. It's shut the door.
Yeah, and that set against such a colorful, like almost Batman 66 TV show backdrop, that colorful, was really, really, really eye-catching and really gets your interest. Like, what's going on here?
Anything else in terms of themes that anybody wanted to touch on or noticed in here?
I don't think personally. This is a movie that I think can be just endlessly dissected.
Yeah.
You know, there's certainly a feminist view specifically of this movie would be very interesting. A psychologist's view of this movie would be very interesting. Almost anyone who works in a film crew, or it's just so lush. It really is. It's a shame that this movie hasn't stood the test of time a little better. I think because it is such a beautiful film and very potent. I think really holds up today for something that is 60 years old. It doesn't feel like you're transported entirely to a world of the past, right? I mean, there's no doubt that this is not modern day, but it's certainly, these don't feel like people who couldn't connect to modern day in any way, where sometimes when the further you get back in film, the more you feel like, boy, if that person was transported to modern day, they'd think it was an alien world entirely. Culturally, not just scientifically. But this still feels grounded 60 years later. These are themes that we can all still recognize, we can all relate to. There wasn't a moment that I thought, well, that's an old-timey problem, or that's an old-timey observation. These are all things that are still resonant in the human condition.
Mm-hmm. And the whole thing about seeing things through a camera's eye, even like Helen, you know, she had her own version of this in a way. You know, she was writing a children's book about a magic camera and what it photographs, and so she had her own little thing going with how the camera sees things. And
another slant on that.
And I guess not only is it still resonant today, but when you consider the proliferation of content creation, I mean, it's maybe more potent than ever, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me is, considering the outcry, the public outcry when this was released, the fact that I assume this was a realistic depiction of the actual merchandise in the newsagent shop, but there were, magazines with nude women on the covers plastered all over the door and the window of the shop. And there's even a spot where when the older gentleman who makes a comment about, a friend of mine told me that you have views for sale, which meant nude photos apparently. And a young girl walks in to buy some candy, and I assumed on the way to school or something. I just thought that was very strange to have things displayed that prominently.
Sex sells, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. They have these almost right out on the street. And this was, some said this was the first British film with nudity, although it's a very quick bit of nudity when he kills the model Millie. So all of that just doesn't mix right to me, It's like, oh, not in the film, but on the street where the kids walk by, that's fine. So yeah, in this shop, and then he does upstairs photography for the owner of the shop with nude models. So what about the model Lauren? I mean, what did that add to the film? Anybody think of that? Because she's standing profiled in the window, and she looks gorgeous. And then when she finally turns to get a straight shot of her face, her face is disfigured on one side, and he becomes quickly obsessed with that. He's very attracted to that and wants to photograph her.
So the way I read that is, as an artist, he's always trying to capture perfection. And so there is this juxtaposition with her imperfection that he sees as perfect, because it defies the expectations of the world. In order to be a perfectionist, you have to recognize a sense of expectation, and her very nature defies expectation. And so I think that he sees like sort of a great relief in that. She can't, as he sees it, make herself perfect, so she therefore doesn't have to worry about anymore. And that's like a longing in him. He wishes he didn't have to be a slave to this sense of perfection, which is his obsession with the filmmaking forces upon him. That's how I view the psychology of an artist, and a love for the unique, or the unconventional.
I that was just something where I just looked at it and thought, so why was this was put in here for a purpose? And
well, I like what Shawn just said, because that's quite similar. Actually, that's dead on in a way from what I could see. I just my thought seeing that model and with him with his camera right there, that's as a lady, when I see something like that, I'm thinking, okay, there's something that women are insecure about, is what is something with your face versus your physical features that's a vulnerable spot right there when you're going to be filmed or photographed or in any media. And he caught that, and that was definitely a uniqueness, was seeing some imperfection that was unique to him. So I mean, I definitely saw that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's easy to draw pretty things. It's easy to draw pretty faces and handsome faces and what. But it's more interesting as an artist if something has an imperfection in it. It's more interesting to draw. It shows more of a character in your drawing.
It's real.
It's real, yeah. It's not Barbie doll. Everything's Barbie doll perfect. It's more interesting to me anyway to draw monsters any day than it is to draw a runway model or not saying that none of that is beautiful. I think everything is beautiful in its way. But as far as being able artistically interesting to draw something more that has imperfections and to try and convey that onto paper or whatever your medium is, paint, paper, whatever. That's always been a more interesting thing to me. So I don't know. Maybe that's had something to do with it.
Yeah. I found that interesting, and I like the way that they portrayed it, because it was a bit of a surprise when she turned. So from her left profile was a gorgeous image of protection, but then when she turned face towards him, and she said, so and so said you don't have to shoot my face, and he said, no, I want to, I must, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out Michael Powell's career was really damaged by the reception that this gave or received. He had a partnership with a guy named Emmerich Pressburger, and they had a production company called The Archers, and they had done a series of classic British films, and none of which I've seen, but I've heard of. Black Narcissus is one from 1947. The Red Shoes is another one, 1948, which, by the way, Maura Shearer was in. She played Vivian, the stand-in actress. That is, I think, the second kill that we see, which was really interesting. But after this, it totally changed. He went from producing these movies. He didn't do a whole lot after that, actually. Maybe a half a dozen films, maybe a few more, few episodes of TV, which is a shame, that later it's become such a, in a way, legendary film, which happens. I did see that he, at one time early in his career, had worked with Hitchcock as a still photographer for him on a couple of his films, even back in the silent era and early talkie. So, and then progressed up through that to start this career with Emmerich Pressburger. So I don't really know enough about the films. I think we've kind of talked enough about the direction of this, but I thought, it's too bad that the change in the course of his career that occurred because of this.
I read some critique of that. He, in his autobiography, presents that as the case. But I read, and I wish I had I don't have the link, but there's a website that sort of seems to be a good fan site that collates some information on this film. And there was a writer who essentially said that the shifting studio system in the UK played as much of a part as the bad reviews of this movie did in his shifting career. He did, in fact, have another movie released after this one that was a completely different film that didn't do well at all and isn't reviewed well historically. Now, whether that is an impact of a stink being put on this film and him being viewed as an exploitation artist, or the fact that he was an auteur that demanded his very specific controls over all of his movies and losing a couple of his big benefactors, might have been more of a factor in that shift of fate for him.
Which would end up being a little bit of a combination of the two.
Yes, and it's certainly interesting to note for sure that. Yeah. Because, again, as I think this is a masterpiece. I think this is a beautiful film. I would think this would be, like Psycho, a launching point to bigger and better things. And he has an opposite trajectory. So regardless of why that happened, I think exploring that is worthwhile and interesting.
Well, I think it's also interesting to me that Psycho, which came out about a few months later, that Hitchcock did not do a press screening for Psycho. And there was some speculation that was the reason, was the hubbub about Peeping Tom.
That would certainly stand to reason when you look at those old reviews. And sadly, I saw an original reviewer of the a British reviewer of 1960, who in 1994, shortly after the director died, put a little mea culpa in saying that I basically was part of the group of people that completely obliterated this film, and I actually now think it's a masterpiece. And so that's an interesting to wonder if that was simply auditing her review of the film, or auditing her conscience for having gone so strong. Because it seems like there was almost a concerted effort by the reviewers right now. Whether there was actual collaboration, we don't really know. But, that was a time, obviously, well before the internet, when a group of film reviewers were a voice, and they could impact the real world in a real way. Whereas now it's just a bunch of us schlubs spitting into microphones every minute of every day.
And I wanted to mention also, just to bring this up, that the film editing was done by Noreen Ackland, who I thought it was interesting that it was a woman, and previous to this, she had done a lot of work for Michael Powell. After this, she branched into working with other filmmakers. But I think I just found that interesting, right? I don't really have any comments about it other than the editing I thought was really good and created that fear. The shots of the women as he's approaching them with his tripod leg and they're seeing themselves in this mirror as he's killing them are chilling, are disturbing.
And even as he says at one point in the movie, the lights went out too quickly. This scene is ruined, right? He's so distraught when the mother's confronting him. The editing integral to this movie. When you're going to spotlight how important editing is to a filmmaker in your movie and like put that in people's brains, oh yeah, editing's a thing that I can look at and critique, you damn well have a really good, well-edited movie, right? And it's a fabulous job.
And that was a pretty profound line. When he said the lights go out too quickly, and with her being blind, she said they always do.
Yeah. That's actually, and I meant to bring this up when we talked about her before, Helen's mother, it's a real interesting trait, I guess, or circumstance that this guy, everything is about visual. And she's the one who can't see, can tell, sees him for what he is, and is worried about her daughter. She talks about him, walking. He walks too light. I don't trust a man who walks too light. And I forget what her daughter tries to excuse it. And she goes, no, it's actually comes off as stealthy. Yeah. So I found that really interesting. The whole character of the mother. Yeah. Karl-Heinz Baum, who is a German or Austrian actor, I should say. How did he do? And do you know anything? Anybody find any information about him?
I did not. I thought he was very, very good. Yeah. The director himself suggested many years later that his wife told him that perhaps he was too pretty. He wanted to go the opposite of a monster movie. He wanted this to be a very human film. But he, in retrospect, thought perhaps he should have gone more average, and it would have been a little less shocking to people. It makes me think of American Psycho, where the that's turned up to 11 because it's deeply satire. This I don't think was meant to be satire. Maybe he wanted to cast a little more towards average, but he was trying to get away from monstrous so much. But this is a very prim and proper British view where he's splitting hairs, I think.
Well, I thought he did a great job, too. I like the way his German accent's never really explained, where it comes from. I thought that was an interesting thing. But
it sounded a little bit to me like a German accent trying to sound a little British. It wasn't a hard German accent, but yeah.
But apparently he was a philanthropist too, and Michael Powell picked him for this role or cast him in this role because Baum had experience with having an overbearing father and that kind of thing. So I thought he was a good choice then because he really pulled off maybe some of the pain of that and in his performance and at the same time, you did feel this sympathy toward him, and then those are the best kinds of villains where you kind of understand where they're coming from and why they do the things they do. As far as movie characters go, not maybe having a little bit of sympathy toward them, and he pulled that off. I think he had that face. I guess it was just this little round baby face that. Very, very non-assuming and very shy and awkward and that kind of thing. But there was this killer boiling right underneath the surface that he just really brought that out perfectly, I thought.
He has that soft appearance. It almost seems harmless, and because it looks like he has, with that soft appearance, his expressive tone and even his voice, like you guys were saying about the accent thing, even his own words, in some ways he was soft-spoken. He had this embodiment of something that was a little bit more of a mysterious air, but something a little bit more relaxing in some ways. I don't know. It just kind of came in waves where things kind of made you could see where there was tension, especially where he was messing with his his mannerisms, the quirks that he built up around his objects, like fiddling and messing with his camera equipment, but also a lot expressive in his face and his eyes. And I felt like that was a strong point to see with his expression, with his eyes, and how You would see where he's looking and who he's interacting with and the way he looks at people. So I definitely felt like his performance was really strong. It was great.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was great. He told a lot just with his facial expressions.
Yeah.
So there was everything from when he was in the on the set with the actress, and he makes some comment behind her. I forget what it is, but the look on his face is deadly.
Mm-hmm.
What he says isn't quite that deadly, but he's definitely gives a foretelling of where he's going with that. And that whole setup was interesting because he did it all to make sure that somebody found the body, right? While it was filming, he could film it right there. Well, another chance of voyeurism. Not only did I film her fear at seeing herself killed, but I am filming the person that discovered her in the chest during filming, right?
Always exploring his art. He's always exploring his art. It's an extremely macabre way, but he's expanding his artistic boundaries, and it's thrilling and horrifying equally.
So I have to ask Chad. Mohr Shearer was a dancer. Actually, was a ballerina before she got into a little bit of acting. Did you watch the whole dance scene?
Yeah.
I actually did.
Okay. Yeah. She was a good dance. She's a good dancer.
Yeah.
I found that to be very interesting.
It was that 60s expression, and I guess, I don't know what you call it, performance dancing kind of moves. It's almost like she was dancing before she knew what the music was going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she did an awesome job at it. I like that kind of stuff. And where it's not exactly, the dancing doesn't exactly go along with the music, and I loved it. I liked it. That's why I didn't fast forward through.
Nice. And by the way, the character of Mark Lewis, the first choices for him were Dirk Bogarde and Lawrence Harvey. And at least what I read was Dirk Bogarde could not, the studio he was contracted to wouldn't release him, and Lawrence Harvey was there during pre-production, but then left for unknown reasons. So I think this worked out well. I absolutely loved Anna Massey as Helen Stevens. Anybody recognize her from another pretty well-known British film from the 70s? She was a victim in Hitchcock's Frenzy.
Interesting.
This is the first thing I remembered. I don't remember seeing her in anything but this.
It struck me as some of her facial expressions just looked familiar, and I started thinking about it. So when I looked at it, that Frenzy popped up right away. I don't see any other films of that type on her list. But yeah, she plays one of the strangled women in Frenzy with her eyes bugging out. So anyway, I thought she was great.
Yeah, she was. She also had that innocent look of her. And she saw what the audience saw, I guess. When he was showing her these videos and movies of him as a child, I think she saw the abuse and saw what his father was doing to him, and she took pity on him. But I think she also saw an innocent little boy, being abused. So maybe she thought he could be redeemed somehow or saved somehow if she could just reach him. And I think she was starting to, but it didn't work out that way. but anyway, I loved her performance. I just, I don't know. There's just something about it that she seemed like a real person, I guess you would say, who was just trying to help somebody else. And there was an honesty to that performance, just like there was her mother. Her mother kind of knew just from listening, not seeing, but listening. She had it all figured out and everything, and I liked it. I liked what she did here. It was a good role, and she did a good job in it.
Well, I mean, towards the end, I guess I'll say something that's common in certain reactions from a character like hers. with her personality, and she seemed, timid and sweet, naive. And then there's certain traits, like when someone reveals, because she doesn't know him, but she has an infatuation with him, and she has this relationship. But when he reveals what he is to her, she was fawning him a little bit, and that there's those reactions when someone reveals their true identity and colors. There's that fight, flight, or freeze reaction, and she had that, almost that freeze, but she was more fawning over him, because she still had feelings, and she was, I felt you see that towards where she's, after what he does to himself, you see she's still fawning and feeling that emotion and that care towards him to the very end, because she's right over his body.
Yeah.
But yeah, excellent performance on her end too.
I have to mention a couple other people that we've seen in other films on DOH. So, Chad and Whitney, and Shawn too, did you recognize who that elderly gentleman customer was that said the line that you said at the beginning, the quote that you said at the beginning, Chad?
I recognize his face, but I don't know.
We used another of his lines, I think, on an intro, which was something to the effect, "There's room for one more inside, sir."
Oh.
The hearse driver in Dead of Night.
Dead of Night. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that was him, but okay.
Miles Mallison. I recognize the name. I'm not saying I recognized him, but after I figured that out, I recognized him. Did he ring a bell at all, Whitney?
No, I didn't.
And this is the typical parts that he plays. He's got well over 100 credits, and a lot of times it's just one or two liners kind of thing, but they tend to be memorable. One other person I wanted to mention was Nigel Davenport, who was the detective sergeant, who was almost kind of comic relief, I believe. He's been in some films that we've done. He was in The Island of Dr. Moreau from 1977. Phase 4 we did in the 1970s. Yes, he played Van Helsing in that's what I was thinking of.
Oh, and Bram Stoker.
He played Van Helsing in the Dan Curtis Dracula movie.
Yeah. Wow, it says he was replaced as Hal in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
He was going to do the voice of Hal, huh?
Yeah, he was the original voice, and then they redubbed it or redid it. Interesting. He's
also in that weird Cornell Wilde film that Bill keeps bringing up, No Blade of Grass.
Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't say weird. It's an interesting.
Picture of Dorian Gray.
That's another Dan Curtis one, I believe. So, anyway, for some reason, I thought he was in some Hammer films. If he was, I'm missing him on his filmography. Did a bunch of episodes of In the Adventures of Robin Hood TV series. I'll have to check them out. Okay. That's all I wanted to think. Anything, we probably need to wind up here. Any last comments from anybody, Shawn? Anything we left on the table that you wanted to mention?
No, I don't think so. I think we've explored this one pretty well. Again, I think that it is a movie that could be endlessly dissected. But I think that we've done a pretty nice job of looking at the different perspectives that we brought to the table. And I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, so have I. I'm really glad Shawn picked this one, because it's probably one I would have watched eventually, but I'm glad we got to see it sooner than later. And I definitely recommend this to anybody that loves those style movies like Psycho and early slasher movies. But this one's elevated a little bit above just the blood and gore. It actually has the story to back it up. It has the characterizations, very well written script, and very interesting characters, very interesting protagonist in the movie too. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Great pick, Shawn.
It's beautiful. It's artistic. It's very unsettling. I just really think that depicting the antagonist as the artist, as the voyeur, you could if you're really interested in seeing that kind of character manifest itself and take to its victims in such a unique way of utilizing its tools as an artist, I think this is something that would be fascinating to just sit and watch it and take everything in for what it is, even if it is uncomfortable. Because there are elements that could make you feel uncomfortable to the abuse and seeing that trauma and the women and how they are victims within that self of that what's reflected back on that trauma on that character. It's still it very much goes to show what is important as to what influences everything today in thrillers and slashers. Like I said earlier, if you're a fan of the show You, that character in You, he's really charming and he's got a handsome appeal and he has an artistic sense. Like this character, if you're into that show, definitely watch this because there's a lot of similarities in this.
I would agree, and I'm really glad that Shawn picked this. This is another one. We actually, Chad, I think we talked about this at one time. It was brought up in something else that we...
Maybe we did, and that's why I had it in my queue. But
that's been an added, what I want to say, delight to this, that our guests, our listener guest hosts have picked films that I've had on my list for a long time, but maybe just never pulled the trigger. So it's been great fun to go ahead and do that and to be able to watch that with and talk about it with people. I like this film a lot. I always get so much more out of preparing for the podcast, watching it and preparing for the podcast and looking a little deeper than just a sort of a standard movie viewer, if that makes any sense. Because I look a lot more at the actual filmmaking, the cinematography, the shot selection, the production design, all that stuff just becomes really familiar. There's one more thing I wanted to mention is the music was done by Brian Easdale, which he doesn't have a lot of credits, but he did win an Oscar for another Michael Powell film, The Red Shoes. And I thought the music was very appropriate and some places, echoed the type of thing that Bernard Herrmann did, not in Psycho, not near as much, but some really good staccato crescendos that really heightened the feeling. All right. Well, listeners, if you enjoy Decades of Horror and the other Gruesome Magazine podcasts, please, it would be greatly appreciated if you could help us out and become a Patreon patron and make anything counts. Everything helps, I should say. It does take money to put these out, although none of us have paid. We're all volunteers. So, and if you can't do that, please share with people. Share with your friends, other horror fans. And be sure to check out our Gruesome Magazine YouTube channel. We're building that as we go very shortly. I think within the next couple of episodes, everything will be video. I think 80s, Decades of Horror 80s, and the Classic are the only ones left now. And we plan to get those moved to the video format in the next couple episodes. So, Grue Believers, that's it for this episode. Every 2 weeks, we'll be focusing on a specific film released between 1920 and 1969. Next up, chosen by another super secret listener guest host, is Son of Kong from 1933. Make sure you join us for that one.
Yes!
Son of Kong. Plenty of ways to stay in touch with us. Please send feedback to feedback@gruesomemagazine.com, or you can leave comments at Gruesome Magazine's H&R DOH podcast Facebook group, or on the website gruesomemagazine.com, or comments on the Gruesome Magazine YouTube channel. Catch us again here in 2 weeks for another great horror movie of the classic era, as only Decades of Horror can do it. Thank you ever so much, Shawn. And everybody, please check out Shawn's podcast, Talk Horror to Me. It's a pleasure having you here. It was great fun talking with you.
Yeah.
It really was an honor to be here, guys. This was a thrill for me. I've listened to every episode at least once. Listened to pretty much everything that comes out of the Decades of Horror and Gruesome magazine world, and have for a very, very long time. So thank you so much for such a warm embrace. It really means the world to me to be here, and this is a great Christmas treat, a great holiday treat.
Yeah, well, it's great for us too.
For us too, man. For us too.
Yeah, it was a blast.
All right. Say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Buenas noches.
I knew she was going to say that.
I'm like, you know what? I might keep to that.